I think we're very risk averse in Canada. And I think what I'll probably tell people, I don't know if it's the right term to use, was like, the water's not that cold and just jump in and do it, right? I think what is the worst that's going to happen? I think perhaps it was inevitable that it would end up where I am today.
Like, it was inevitable that you would end up starting your own company?
Yeah, probably. Whether I knew it or not, I think it was probably inevitable.
Did you always feel like you didn't fit in quite well on the other more corporate path? Like, how did you realize this?
Yeah, I mean, like the definitely like the corporate path, especially when you're working for a large company, you end up working in a very narrow field. You are the guy who does this one thing, and that's it. And that got really boring for me. In terms of the fit, yeah, I mean, I think I did fit in well in academia. Don't get me wrong. It was a great career, definitely very highly politicized, as with any large corporate structure. I think probably why I'm saying it's inevitable that I became an entrepreneur is, just like I got bored in the corporate world, I got bored after a while at the university. You reached a plateau and then you can only do so much, right? And, there's a saying that the stakes in academia the politics in academia are so cutthroat because the stakes are so low. And so I definitely saw that, and so I said, okay, what's next for me? And I think with entrepreneurship, there's no real ceiling in terms of, if you're a founder, you can say, I'm building this. And then a few years, if you want to pivot and do something else, I think it's quite possible, and I think there's massive upside compared to what you can do in a large corporate structure. So I think right now I'm very happy where I am. I'm by no means bored with what I'm doing. It's incredibly exciting. And I think I'm where I'm supposed to be right now.
Yeah, and when you're looking at North Vector and starting this, what came first? Did you say, like, I want to be an entrepreneur? Or did you say, there's this idea, nobody's doing it, I have to do it to fill that gap?
I think it's probably a bit of both. I think it has to be a little bit of both. I think you need to, if you're going to be an entrepreneur, I think you need to want to have that drive to kind of, I don't know, maybe not fit into a big corporate structure, not have a boss. I don't know. For me, that became a pretty big thing, leaving the university, is that I just didn't, I didn't like playing the game so much. But I think you also need to be very product led. And we are a very technical team here at North Vector Dynamics. We saw, hey, we want to build some of the coolest stuff that is currently being built in Canada. So I don't think you can separate the two dimensions there. I was drawn by both.
Yep. I mean, you started North Vector at a time where, Canada wasn't very focused on the defense space or even the startup space very much, but particularly in defense, I think it was nearly impossible to get any investing. How has that changed from then till now? And was there any moment where you thought, like, I can't stay in Canada, I have to move somewhere else?
Yeah. So, things have definitely changed. I was, we started fundraising for our previous round before anyone would even look at a defense company. And, we're not a dual use company. We are almost uniquely single use. So it was very, very difficult to get anyone to pay attention to us. And we got our first few believers who ended up investing, and then this really started moving things in the right direction. And then definitely with government announcements and BDC changing its mandate to allow for defense investments, just accelerated things. And I could tell you, I mean, like right now, everyone wants to participate in this. I can't tell you how many investors I've actually had to turn away, which is, I don't take it for granted at all, because I remember very vividly what it was like not even a year ago trying to get investor meetings. Now, in terms of like wanting to move to the States, I would say like it wasn't a very strong pull but I would be lying if I said that we never thought about, hey, this will just be way easier to to just build in the States. And I think many entrepreneurs, unfortunately, they think that in Canada, or they get tempted by it. Not everyone does it necessarily. Um, and so this is probably a call to arms, I guess, for our capital markets, for our government to just say, hey, you know what? We need reforms in how we do things in order to keep our best and brightest and keep the IP and all the wealth creation in Canada. And so, long story short, I mean, yeah, we have thought about it, but not for more than a couple of minutes, really. So, we are quite invested in doing this in Canada, keeping our headquarters in Canada. Obviously, Canada's not going to be our only customer right now. We're in very advanced talks with partners in Germany and Czechia, in the UAE, in the United States. And so this is a global play. But Canada has given us a lot as well. And I think there's a real opportunity to do this here. I think, the friction that we experience in Canada is also an opportunity, right? The fact that we do not have a very developed industrial base in defense is an opportunity for builders like ourselves and many other companies to fill that void. So it's a combination of headwinds, but also massive opportunities. And now that everyone's also reevaluating their supply chains and where they procure from, is also a big chance for Canadian companies to step up on the world stage, right? People are increasingly becoming economic nationalists, right? Germany wants to procure from Germans and other very friendly countries, and maybe reevaluating, hey, do we procure from the United States? So yeah, I think, long story short, we're very committed to Canada and maintaining our presence here. And there are no immediate or even long-term plans to be moving our company abroad, at least from a headquarter perspective.
Yeah, I mean, if you're comparing Canada to the US, I mean, obviously the US has significantly more capital. I mean, they have a lot of advantages compared to us, but when you look at Canada right now, I think we have the opportunity to build the foundation, where the US is already, the industry is very well built out, but in Canada, like you're saying, there's less competition right now because it has been suffocated so much recently. So when you have this sudden turn, this focus on startups in the defense space, it's an opportunity to grow at the beginning of something, which I think has a lot of advantages there. When you're looking at VCs, investors, the government, they're doing a lot right now. There's been a lot of sudden shifts, but are there any immediate changes that you would look for? Anything specific, or anything that maybe other people aren't talking about?
I don't think I would say anything that's original that hasn't been lamented or communicated by others. Definitely on the capital side, I think we need a lot more risk capital in Canada. I think we're still applying, from a personal perspective, I guess, as a builder in defense, I think we're still seeing a lot of investors apply playbooks that just simply don't translate to defense, right? What works for SaaS does not work for a deep tech company working in defense, with the defense procurement cycles that are much, much longer than a direct-to-consumer play, for example. So there needs to be a mindset and a shift and a cultural change there. On the government front, I mean, we've talked a lot about it. I think definitely one of the things that could be done a lot better, and I know that the CAF is looking at that, is just strengthening their relationship with industry. There's still like a huge, there's a big distance between industry and the end user in the CAF. And so we're often building in with blinders on, right? We don't know, hey, are we building something that they might ultimately want? Because this is how defense is happening right now in the 21st century, is that you're not waiting for the RFP to come out to start designing and building your solution. You build the solution first, and then you try to sell it to the government. And so tightening that relationship between the military and industry is going to be incredibly important, not only for industry to be able to position itself, invest the right capital in the right places, but also to be able to iterate very quickly. And again, it's going to take some time, but we have a lot of really good people in the CAF right now, and I know that they are looking at that and, making access to some of our army bases or our military bases a lot more readily available for testing, for iteration, and making end users more available for industry as well.
So a little bit back into you and your entrepreneurship journey. Like as a founder, this is your first company, right?
Correct. Well, technically my second. So I had another consulting company before, but this is my first one that is venture backed and that we're really looking to scale into something massive.
First startup.
Yeah.
You're doing something that, not many Canadians have done before. When you're dealing with, this constant feeling potentially of unreadiness or putting yourself into new situations, what advice would you give to other first-time founders on how to navigate that, how to do things without permission?
Yeah, and I think it's an interesting question. I think we're very risk averse in Canada, and I think what I'll probably tell people, I don't know if it's the right term to use, was like, the water's not that cold and just jump in and do it, right? I think what is the worst that's going to happen? I think you had asked me for another piece that you're working on, who's my hero in science or entrepreneurship. And I gave you the example of Oppenheimer, who was an academic like myself, although I do not compare myself in the least to Oppenheimer and his capabilities. And, he had the vision and the courage to step out of the confines of academia and the ivory tower to basically lead the Manhattan Project, which is just absolutely huge endeavor, probably quite foreign to him. He had, at the time, he had not really led large teams of people and things like that, but obviously he had a lot of success in the process. Whether we see that success as being a good thing or bad thing for humanity, that's beyond the point I'm trying to make. So what I would tell kind of first-time entrepreneurs, or even whether you're an entrepreneur or not, but you're just trying to step out of your comfort zone, I think you need to ask yourself, like, what is the worst that's going to happen? And maybe optimize or try not to mitigate all of the downside, but think about what the upside could actually be and just kind of jump in, right? I mean, I had a job for life at the university as a tenured academic, and I left that because I see that the upside in what I'm building is incredibly exciting, and the alternative is just kind of comfort, and that's just not very. For some people, that's perfectly fine, and I there's no judgment around that. But I think, generally speaking, we as a country are a bit too risk averse, and I think we should be optimizing and thinking about what is the best that could happen instead of what is the worst, or what are the worst things that could happen.
Yeah, not what if it all goes wrong, but what if it all goes right. I've been, for the Canadian Explorers, I've been adding for the slogan, "Fortune favors the bold," which I believe was an old Robin saying, but I think it's very true. The more bold you are, the more you are prepared to take action, to be confident, to be courageous, the more luck comes your way. You open yourself to more possibilities, at least, of receiving that luck. On the topic of this for Canada, I believe we've had a lot of situations in the past where we've made big promises. So how can we make sure, this isn't just a moment where we decide we're going to focus on startups or on defense? Like, how do we make sure we actually follow through with this?
Yeah, I mean, I think what our government does from a policy perspective is probably downstream from culture, I would say. And so it's all about changing the culture. And that's why, people, I don't need to name names necessarily, but people in this startup and defense space, they're doing a lot from the advocacy perspective, becoming more public thought leaders in the space, because I think if you can get the general population to buy into what it is that you are selling, which is basically entrepreneurship is incredibly important. Defense is incredibly important. And not only from a sovereign perspective, but also from as an economic force multiplier, and so on and so forth, then the government will respond to what, or ideally the government will respond to what the general public all feel is a national imperative. And so I think we need to work a lot, and this is something that you're doing, which is incredibly important. The people at like Build Canada, I would like to think ACDC as well, is just changing the culture and making sure that the people are aware of the importance of sovereign entrepreneurship, capital markets, defense, what have you.
So when everything is all said and done, everything that you've built in your lifetime, what do you want your legacy to be with North Vector, with everything that you've done?
Well, that's a very good question. What do I want my legacy to be after all said? I guess people can have multiple legacies, perhaps, because I still see, maybe this is not the right thing to say as an entrepreneur, but I'm first and foremost a husband and a father, and so my legacy is my children when I'm building at home. So what I really enjoyed being a professor more than anything was working with young people and showing young people, mentoring them, whether it be on their research projects or engineering projects, or just helping them to figure out how to think about a difficult problem, right? And so maybe in my entrepreneurial journey, if the legacy that I leave behind is that I showed younger entrepreneurs that, yes, it is doable to build a big company here in Canada. And, I did it for a good reason and against all odds, because, let's just say building a missile company is probably not as easy to do in Canada than building a software company. I would say not that it's easy to do a software company, but I think the odds are still very much stacked against us. And so, again, if I can show that you can take these risks and be successful, I think that'll be a very good outcome from a legacy perspective.